I mean, 30,000 people on average were looking at this site each day, that especially if it was a little more interesting time in the trial. Okay, so yeah, here's an example of an article that was posted. They're on the Manning Support Network site, which is a really amazing resource for all you want to know about Chelsea Manning. And then my drawings would accompany these articles. Clark Stokely was another artist, and so his drawings and my drawings, we were in a little courtroom sketch artist dueling throughout summer. Okay, so 20 of the original works were sold in online auctions, which the Private Manning Support Network promoted on its website. Through selling 20 of those original drawings, $5,000 was raised, and after covering my expenses of the summer, 80% of the profits from those sales were donated. So I donated $1,500 to Manning's Defense Fund, and $500 was donated to Claire Leibowitz for the production in Washington, D.C. of a play about Chelsea Manning called Bradass 87. On the first day of the defense argument, the lead defense attorney, David Coombs, screened that video, Collateral Murder, in the courtroom. And so this is a little bit about what the courtroom looked like. There's screens all over, and that's where the Collateral Murder thing was shown. I sat over on this side. I sat behind the prosecution attorneys. The Judge Colonel Denise Lind was up here, and over here is where the defense attorneys were, and Chelsea Manning sat every day. So what I really understood after going through this summer, and what I'd like you to understand about this trial in the U.S. public about U.S. military operations, by revealing horrible truths which were being kept secret from the public. This is something Manning stated in a pre-trial hearing. And I think it shows how much he really cared about the United States and about public debate, about democracy. And I made this painting showing him and the leaking American flag, the tearing American flag, to associate him with patriotism. Manning said, "I believe that if the general public, especially the American public, had access to the information contained within the Iraq and Afghan war logs, this could spark a domestic debate on the role of the military in our foreign policy in general, as well as it related to Iraq and Afghanistan." This image was used on a well-known website, RussiaToday.com. I was happy about that.
Yeah.
Not too many, a few other news sites picked a couple of things up. So after the releases that Manning put out, many people in the State Department were particularly miffed about the exposure of their obvious hypocrisy in their relations with other countries' embassies. But high officials in the military were also saying things like the following, very revealing things. Robert Gates, he's a former United States Secretary of Defense, said this about the WikiLeaks releases that Manning leaked to WikiLeaks. Robert Gates said, "Is this embarrassing?" Yes, and it was embarrassing because a lot about U.S. internal operations was shown, which is different than our outward appearance a lot. He said, "Is this embarrassing?" Yes. "Is this awkward?" Yes. "Consequences for U.S. foreign policy?" I think fairly modest. So, Secretary of Defense is saying this. But then when it came to the trial of Private Manning, the government presented a much different viewpoint. Though not one person was killed or even injured as a result of the WikiLeaks releases, the government prosecution claimed that Manning's releases endangered the lives of military personnel and damaged the relations of U.S. State Department officials with their counterparts in other countries. We heard prosecution witness after witness after witness go on the stand and try to talk about this, but they were very, very unconvincing. This is a person named Patrick Kennedy of the State Department talking at trial one day. And here's one of the more ludicrous things that was spoken. He said, well, it's impossible to know what someone is not sharing with you. That is a risk to the national security. So, try to figure that one out. I'll leave it at that. And so, a lot of times I just drew smaller drawings. This is a witness named Mark Johnson. I have many of these drawings. This is a forensics expert named David Schaefer. Many forensics experts were on the stand because they talked about the computer, all the computer issues. This is Colonel Denise Lind. She was the judge. And I have many more drawings if you're interested over here. So, where am I? Okay, now that was a little bit about the prosecution argument. The defense argument was led by David Coombs, Manning's lead attorney. And when it came time for him to present the defense, the aiding the enemy charge was still on the books. Manning was still being charged with aiding the enemy. Coombs had filed a motion that charge be dismissed, but it was not dismissed. So he had to defend against this charge. And he put a man named Yochai Benkler, Harvard professor Yochai Benkler, took the stand. And it was a brilliant day. This was really my favorite day in court. It was amazing. After listening to all these prosecution witnesses speak about nothing, with the prosecution throwing anything at the wall to see what would stick, and nothing stuck. They didn't prove any damage. Finally, we had someone who had something to say on the stand. So Yochai Benkler testified about the seriousness of the aiding the enemy charge. He warned the judge about the ramifications for journalism if Manning were to be found guilty of this charge. So if Manning, and thus WikiLeaks, were to be found guilty of aiding the enemy just because they printed true information, which the, quote, enemy had access to via the internet, this would set a precedent for the government to prosecute any journalistic enterprise which prints something the government doesn't want someone who it deems as the enemy to see. So Benkler spoke at length about the foundational history of journalism in this country and the need to protect freedom of speech. It was a really beautiful day. There are other examples of abuse of the justice system that we see right now. We see Edward Snowden in exile in Russia with espionage charges against him for his revelations about the NSA's illegal espionage. Now we also see Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, in exile in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He's been there over 600 days. He hasn't walked outside in 600 days. During the Obama administration, more whistleblowers have been prosecuted. I could go through a long list. I know of many whistleblowers on the top of my head. Won't go there right now, but there's a long list, and there's many, many more. Obama has prosecuted more whistleblowers than all the other presidents combined. So, I'll speak a minute quick about the Manning's switch from Bradley Manning to the Chelsea Manning name. During the sentencing phase of the trial, two different military psychologists took the stand, and they spoke really decisively for the defense about the condition called gender dysphoria, which Manning had his whole life. when he was Bradley Manning, in which a person has an overwhelming desire to be the opposite sex. The day after the sentencing, Private Manning's attorney read a statement, and he read the statement on the Today Show from Manning, in which she said, "I am female. I want to be called Chelsea. I am Chelsea Manning." So now that's what we do. She is now in Fort Leavenworth prison. She's accepting letters, and I have her address here. It's also on those sheets. She'll be up for parole after 7 years. In the military prisons, people come up for parole after they've served 1/3 of their sentence. So they're saying 1/3 of her sentence is actually seven years, because it's 1/3, which comes out as 10 years minus 3 years for time served already. There is also an appeals process happening, which there might be an appeals case coming up in about a year or more. And so I just have a couple more drawings to show. These two drawings I started in the courtroom when the condition of gender dysphoria was being discussed, and we learned about how Bradley Manning really wanted to be female, and he did his whole life. So this is one drawing. This is the only original drawing I have left of Chelsea. All the rest of them were sold in the online auction. And then this is a drawing of Chelsea with her 3 defense attorneys. This is David Coombs, the lead attorney, who's a civilian attorney now. He used to be in the military, now he's civilian. And these are the 2 military attorneys. And I loved watching these men all summer. They were very unified. They were really kind to each other. I really enjoyed being in their presence, and felt like Chelsea was really in good hands all summer with these men.